And before the break, we were telling you about how a pre-game gesture by several St. Louis Rams showing solidarity with Ferguson protesters has now provoked an angry backlash by police officers, specifically the police union in St. Louis. A spokesman called it offensive and inflammatory. I want to bring in CNN legal analyst Paul Callan and Danny Cevallos. And, Paul, what's fascinating is when we see that image of those players coming through that tunnel with the mist and the fog and their hands up, to me, it reminded me of that iconic 1968 Summer Olympic shot of the two runners on the Olympic podium. And see, there you see them. Let's just sort of play it very slowly. And it reminds me almost as powerful as this, with the protest sign. Do you think the players, Paul, were right to do that, or do you think they should have saved it for a different form and a different venue?
Well, like the African-American Olympic players in '68, this is going to be enormously controversial. A lot of Americans thought it was un-American to have that done at the Olympics, and I can assure you that a lot of Americans will think it's inappropriate to inject your personal political opinions into a sporting event in the United States. There's going to be a big controversy about this.
And so, Danny, what do you think? Do you think it was right? Do you think it was wrong? Do you think they were just players exercising free speech?
Right or wrong is above my pay grade, but when it comes to the First Amendment only applies when the government tries to restrict speech. It has nothing at all to do with the employer-employee relationship in the NFL between players and teams. But it's interesting. Paul and I were reviewing the applicable rules, the NFL policy manual, and there does appear to be a rule as to personal messages that applies to pre-game activities. However, that rule says that players are prohibited from otherwise conveying personal messages, and if they finish there, it would be no question. But then it adds, either in writing or in illustration.
Was this an illustration?
Was this an illustration, or are they talking about drawings? So is this a case where the NFL rules may not prohibit this behavior?
Right.
Or is it the case that the NFL can pretty much do whatever it wants?
But, it's interesting. On some levels, it's like splitting hairs. I think, obviously, the NFL is also dealing with what was going on in Ferguson, just watching it, knowing how many people are being impacted. For some of their players to make such a strong political statement, will it set the bar for others to follow suit? If they don't take action against these particular players, no matter how incendiary this whole thing in Ferguson has been, that's the issue. If you allow this, do you allow, right? I mean, it's...
Well, that's why I think you'll see the NFL probably, maybe they have to amend the code, but they don't want political statements being made at sporting events because of the disagreement that people have about political issues. So
every time this comes up in the NFL, someone comes up with a new creative end zone celebration, whether it be slitting the throat or the Omega symbol, and the NFL responds and they outlaw it and they ban it. So as creative as people continue to get in the NFL will usually look at it and say, you've had your fun, and it's banned.
There's something to be said for that, because obviously, sports are the great uniter. Sports are the great unifier, although it depends on what team you're rooting for. But the point being that everybody can sit down and watch sports, and there's a camaraderie and there's a competition, but in the end, it's usually friendly. Here, when you divide it with a political statement, it becomes something much different. Paul?
But here's what the players are going to say. They're going to say, hey, we have political opinions too, and why should we be muted? It's not fair. And by the way, think about movie stars for instance. Sometimes I can't watch certain movie stars because they're so political, but they're great actors. And so you have great football players with politics that you may not agree with. It's a problem in a lot of areas of entertainment.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting also that this was the first time in a week that, well, although I guess this is the first time they played, that they actually came out with such a powerful gesture. All right, Paul Callan, Danny Cevallos, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.